In section 17.7, we're going to talk about the history of aspirin. Aspirin has a really awesome history, although a lot of people are kind of confused about the origin of aspirin. It's pretty common for people to believe that aspirin is a derivative of a chemical that is found in the bark of a willow tree, and that a long time ago, hundreds of years ago, Native Americans and other people living at that time knew the medicinal properties of the willow bark and would take strips of willow bark and chew on it, or maybe make a tea out of it as a way of attempting to relieve pain. And while all of that is true, it actually has nothing to do with aspirin at all. So let's talk about the history of aspirin. So first of all, the willow bark tree thing. The fact that Native Americans would chew the bark of a willow tree to get analgesic or pain relieving effects, that is absolutely accurate. The substance that's found in the willow bark tree is a molecule called salicin. Here is its structure. And this molecule has absolutely nothing to do with aspirin at all. There is a theory that perhaps our body may convert salicin to aspirin, and that's definitely a possibility, but that's not something that we have proven. It's just a theory. So the salicin, which is an effective analgesic, and is true, is in the willow bark. It is absolutely not aspirin, and it's not even remotely related to aspirin at all. That's kind of right here. This is where salicin's history stops. About 100 years later, people found that another plant, the meadowsweet, which is like a weed, that plant had similar analgesic properties. So people could pick the leaves or the smaller parts of the meadowsweet plant and chew it or use it as a tea or whatever, and they found that it also had analgesic property, just like the willow bark did. But instead of chewing up leaves off of a plant, which people started to think maybe that wasn't very classy, chemists started deriving the active ingredient, extracting the active ingredient straight out of the meadowsweet plant and giving it directly to consumers. That active ingredient that they were taking out of the meadowsweet plant was salicylic acid, which we just talked about. Salicylic acid and alpha hydroxy acid. We currently use it today for treating acne and for treating warts and things like that, topical. So it's a very strong acid, and because of its strength, it caused people to have irritation in their mouth because the tissues inside our mouth are pretty sensitive, and also stomach pain. So even though salicylic acid was an effective analgesic, it wasn't really consumer friendly. So the chemists at the time started coming up with a way to treat the salicylic acid, to convert it, to make it something that was easier on people. And the first substance that they came up with was sodium salicylate. They treated salicylic acid with sodium hydroxide directly, and they came up with this substance as a cousin or a derivative of salicylic acid. It doesn't irritate your mouth or your stomach because it's not an acid anymore, but it turns out that this substance is extremely sweet, like maybe too sweet. Many people found that they couldn't actually consume it because it made them gag or it made them throw up, and it's kind of hard to imagine something being that sweet that it's just not consumable. But it genuinely was so sweet that many people just literally could not tolerate it. They couldn't take it at all. Sodium salicylate is not credited as being the first synthetic pain-relieving medication, but I would like to argue that it is. It was an analgesic. Even though people didn't really like to take it, it did work, and it is synthetic, meaning that it was made by a person. It was not found from a natural plant. So during all of this, while all of this was going on, there was a chemist named Hoffman who had a father who had arthritis, who was in quite a bit of pain, and he was not able to take salicylic acid or sodium salicylate, either one of them, because he couldn't handle them. So one of the things that Hoffman worked on, one of the many things that Hoffman worked on, was coming up with a derivative of salicylic acid that had the pain-relieving properties, but was not irritating or excessively sweet. And one of the substances that he created was acetyl salicylic acid, which we know today as aspirin. This is the molecule that is credited as being the first synthetic or artificially made pain reliever. After it was synthesized, then we found it had other properties as well, like fever reducer, and also good for preventing blood clots and antiplatelet. But as you can see, aspirin is actually derived from a molecule, salicylic acid, that was found in the meadowsweet plant and not at all derived from salicin, which was found in the bark of the willow tree.